All right, welcome back to On the Record. We're talking to Kevin Sell, who's a Republican running against Steve Pendry in the May primary for Campbell County Judge Executive. Kevin, on your website, which is www.kevinsell.com, you say this: I'm running for Campbell County Judge Executive because it's time we take a new direction in our county, a direction that is not based on spending and taxation, but rather true industrial growth. Has Judge Pendry and the fiscal court, have they spent and taxed people too much? What are you going to do differently?
Well, I think the biggest argument that I have for that is that you can make a claim that you're balancing a budget. And we do that in business, and we've had to do that in the various state commissions. But balancing a budget can't be predicated upon repetitive tax increases. So what has been 11 years of repetitive tax increases, in my opinion, has to cease or be reduced in some manner, as well as the spending. I think some of the spending with regards to the courthouse, which is well over $13 million now, with the office furniture, which reached almost $600,000, and with signage, still trying to put my finger on that one at $90,000, it seems to be a consistent process. So the answer, the short answer to that is no, that they actually haven't been spending what I would consider and what most consider within their means, especially when everybody else, businesses and people, individuals, are having to do the same. They're not really doing more with less. They're trying to do the same with less. And I think that same application can be made, and that same argument can be made and even implemented on a county government level.
I want to talk to you about the courthouse because that is an issue in all these county races this year. But I want to talk to you about the taxing. Are you talking about the House Bill 44 that where the county has to vote each year, or what other kind of taxes? In the House Bill 44, if the county agrees to take it, there's an automatic increase in the real estate tax.
Yeah,
correct?
That's the automatic. I call it the 4% grab.
Okay.
In some cases, a couple of years ago, they actually tried to go beyond that. And what happened was what I recall of it was that you had essentially every member of the fiscal court sign a letter that went to the editor urging residents not to sign it, and you essentially had a couple of people from the mid area or south area of the county get more than enough, and it had to go through the recall petition, and they won. Right. So you have to worry about when you're getting that much resistance and people seeing what's being spent versus what's being produced in the county, which is not as much as it should be. You kind of got to tie that all back together, and I think that's really where the emphasis lies.
Do you think there's an argument for prices go up, it costs more every year, every day to operate, not every day, but every year to operate government, that they wouldn't be taking this money unless they need it?
I don't necessarily believe that's true. I believe the 4% with most county governmental agencies is always been the assumed rate that you just do it every year. Yeah. Nobody can do anything about it. Yeah. We just do it because we've always done it. Much like discussion over the county seat. If you look at those depositions, well, why did you do what you did? Well, tradition. Well, we've always done it. Well, that conflicts with the letter of the law. And I'm not saying that the taxation at 4% does. I'm just saying that I think people, if they're doing the same with less, they're going to expect that kind of accountability to be applied to their elected officials.
All right, let's talk about that new courthouse. It's under construction at 12th Street and Mama Street.
Correct.
And I covered Campbell County for years. I have recently been in that fiscal court building down on 4th Street. It is a dump. It needs to be replaced. Are you saying you would have opposed construction of that building, or do you think it's a Cadillac when maybe they should have had a Chevy or even a Yugo?
Well, I'll tell you this. It's the nicest looking backwards building I've ever seen. And you can see it beautifully from your rearview mirror if you're driving one way on Mama Street. Otherwise, I think it's too much in one place. There are other alternatives that, in my mind, and you got to remember, I'm a contractor, so I kind of can put these things into cost terms, that we have to serve all areas of the county. And to lump a lot of stuff in the north or the south is inappropriate. For instance, today I filed my papers. I was able to do it at the Southern, at Jack Snodgrass's office in Alexandria, but they don't normally do that. They did it because they're closed, because they're moving. Otherwise, I would have had to go to the north. And I think that's what people want. People in the north, Newport, Fort Thomas, Dayton, Bellevue, they expect to be able to go there. Cold Spring, Alexandria, Grant Slick, they expect to be able to get the same service there. And I think you can do that without building such a grandiose facility. I really do.
Steve Pendry took a lot of heat. Of course, he's a Republican. He appointed Jim Daly, who's a Democrat county attorney. The judge, Executive Pendry, did offer the job or the appointment at first to Tim Snyder, who's a lawyer. Tim at first turned it down. Then he decided to run. Then Tim was just too busy in his law practice and dropped out. Do you agree with Steve Pendry's appointment of Jim Daly as county attorney?
Well, no, and I'll tell you why.
All right.
I don't think that Jim Daly and Tim Snyder were the only two people that he could have looked at that particular time. And I think there was no sense of urgency unless this thing may have been worked out ahead of time. I would think that some aspects of the law would allow acting positions until you can clearly vet this process and find out who is qualified. I mean, let's face it, Jim's a nice guy. I've met him. He's city attorney for a couple of people. He was also chief deputy at the jail. He wasn't fully engaged in the process. And I think there's other talented people in the legal community that should have been considered, should have been interviewed. More due diligence, I think, on my opponent's part.
He was an assistant county attorney at one point, so
Correct.
he's been familiar with this office. But would you have vetted him if you were judge executive? Would you have looked at a Democrat? Or do you think Steve Pendry crossed a line? I know that I've talked to some other public officials, not so much publicly, but behind the scenes, and some major players who were upset that said the judge never should have appointed a Democrat.
I wouldn't have done it. The bottom line is the Republican Party puts me in there for a reason. There are policies and procedures. When you file that form with the state on your declaration supporting the party that got you there, and I think, and the Democrats would agree if they were in this position, that's what you do, that is Party Rule 101, regardless of what party you belong to. All
right, we're going to take a break and continue our discussion. Let's talk about some of these issues going on in the county. I want to find out where you'd like to see some road money and some infrastructure money spent, and some other plans you have if you're elected judge executive. We'll be right back with Kevin Sell.